Have you ever heard the rumor that Roswell was just a latecomer? That Aurora, a small and forgotten Texas town, was actually the site of America's first UFO crash? Join me as we dig deep into this story, not just to uncover truth or fiction, but to understand why a community clings to such a legend as its final lifeline. If you love stories that are both thrilling and rich in human meaning, don't forget to hit subscribe and like the video so we can keep exploring more mysteries across America together. Rock Wall, the mysterious underground wall of Texas. Have you ever passed through a town and wondered why it has such a strange name? In Texas, there's one like that called Rock Wall. But this isn't a random name. It harks back to an old legend, a story that blurs the line between fact and fiction, stirring curiosity about the mysteries hidden deep beneath the Texas soil. In 1851, a man digging a well accidentally discovered sandstone walls, fitted tightly together like medieval fortifications. It wasn't just a few odd stones. It was a system of underground stone walls stretching for miles beneath the town, up to half a meter thick and several meters high, with joints so precise they seemed crafted by human hands. Rumors spread from there. People said these were the ruins of a lost civilization, or even a race of giants that once lived in Texas. In 1886, newspapers fanned the flames by recounting stories of massive iron boxes, 25-foot-long iron beds, axes weighing dozens of kilograms, and even soup cauldrons filled with human bones. According to these tales, the giants didn't just build walls. They were cannibals who cooked people in giant iron tubs. In the 1920s, a self-styled Count de Prorok, a traveling archaeologist and storyteller, came to Rock Wall and confidently declared that these stone walls were definitely the work of an ancient race. His dramatic claims quickly became sensational news across America and strengthened the belief that Rock Wall hid a grand secret. However, the scientific community saw the story differently. Geologists like Richard Burles and Robert Hill studied the stone wall's structure as early as the late 19th century. They found that the walls were actually clastic dikes, cracks in the ground filled with sand and mud, later compressed into solid rock over time. The regular horizontal and vertical lines were simply natural fracture patterns, not ancient masonry joints. Even in 2013, the show America Unearthed brought in an expert to measure the rock's magnetism and found that their magnetic alignment matched Earth's poles exactly. Clear evidence that the rocks had never been moved or arranged by human hands. Science concludes, this is nature's work, not the handiwork of giants. Honestly, hearing this story reminds me of a time I went trekking in a national park. I once stood before a strange, layered rock face and wondered if ancient people had built it. It turned out to be nothing but nature's masterpiece, the patient artistry of time and geology sculpting that beauty. I find it fascinating how easily we weave stories to fill the gaps in our knowledge. Maybe it's because we're always longing to find something extraordinary in the ordinary. We're often drawn to mysteries, enchanted by the possibility of buried civilizations or bizarre creatures. But that same fascination should also remind us to appreciate the true beauty and wonder of nature. Sometimes, our curiosity doesn't just lead us to thrilling stories. It helps us understand the world around us more deeply, a world that has patiently crafted its masterpieces without any human hand. Monahan's Sand Hills. The missing wagon train in the sea of sand. Imagine dunes towering up to 70 feet, wind howling without rest, and fine sand constantly shifting shape, like a wild ocean spread across the land. In West Texas, the Monahan Sand Hills are nothing less than a living desert, always moving and keeping the secrets of time buried within. Main content. In Texas folklore, There's a story about a wagon train in 1918 that set out from Fort Worth, aiming for El Paso. On those wagons rode several families, hoping to find a promised land. Among them was a woman carrying a roll of blue cloth, a gift from her mother, meant to be sent to an aunt in El Paso as a link between two branches of the family. But the wagon train vanished. No one ever saw them again. No trace remained. Only rumors of sandstorms or conflict with native tribes, even though, in reality, tensions had greatly subsided by then. Throughout the 1920s, people searched, but it was in vain. Then, in the 1930s, a cattleman wandering the Monahans Dunes stumbled over something hard. It was a wooden wheel. Digging deeper, he found charred wagon fragments, a stone arrowhead, and even a chest filled with precious belongings, the most striking of which was a roll of blue cloth. When he brought it back to town, people realized it matched perfectly with the piece of fabric the woman's family still kept, the last surviving fragment of an unfinished promise. Yet aside from these scattered physical finds and local oral tradition, there is no definitive historical record of the lost wagon train. No documents, no newspapers of the time mentioning it, no official archives. Perhaps the sand swallowed everything, or perhaps the story was woven from memory, grief, and the human need for answers about those who disappeared. I once camped in white sand hills in the Midwest, and I know all too well the feeling of getting lost in a world that changes hour by hour. By day, gentle winds carve soft, rippling lines in the sand. By night, strong gusts erase every footprint, wiping away all sense of direction. Even with a map in hand, it's easy to lose your bearings. I think this story clearly reflects how fragile and small we are before vast nature, where just one storm can bury everything forever. The tale of the missing wagon train in the Texas sands may be more than just a spooky legend meant to frighten travelers. It's also a reminder of the value of family memory. In a world that changes relentlessly, the threads that connect us, even as delicate as a blue cloth in swirling sand, still hold the deepest meaning. They are promises, kinship, longing, and the reasons we try to find our way back to one another, no matter how far time and space may separate us. Black-eyed children of Texas, the black-eyed kids in the night. In the darkness of Texas, there are folk tales that send chills down your spine, especially when you hear a knock at your door late at night and the cold voice of a stranger outside asking to be let in. One of the creepiest urban legends to come out of Texas is the story of the black-eyed children, kids who look ordinary but have completely black, lifeless eyes. The most famous origin of this legend comes from Brian Bethel, a Texas journalist. In 1998, he shared his experience. That night, he was parked near a movie theater when two children, around 9 to 12 years old, approached wearing black hoodies. They knocked on his window and asked for a ride to get money from their mother to buy movie tickets. Brian immediately felt uneasy, especially when he realized the showtime had started 45 minutes earlier, making their story implausible. And when he looked into their eyes, they were nothing but deep, unlit blackness. He was frozen with terror. In a panic, he drove off while the children whispered, "Let us in." Not long after, in Amarillo, Texas, Deanna M. recounted a similarly terrifying experience. Late at night, while staying at her mother's house, she heard knocking at the door. Two teenagers, around 14 to 16 years old, stood outside in the darkness, asking to come in to use the phone. Deanna was about to open the door out of pity, but the hallway light fell on their pale faces and their soulless black eyes, sending her into a panic as she slammed the door shut. She called the police while the knocking grew louder and more forceful. But when the officers arrived, the two strangers had vanished without a trace. Both stories share the same haunting traits: childlike appearance, but pitch black eyes, sweet yet insistent voices, and always the chilling plea, "Let us in." An invitation that provokes both pity and fear. Honestly, I've had my own experience that sent chills down my spine, though it had nothing to do with black eyes or the supernatural. Late at night, I was driving through the suburbs in thick fog. Suddenly, by the roadside, I saw a child waving, small and shivering in my headlights. My heart seized with fear, and then ached with compassion. I stopped the car, nervously rolled down the window to ask, and it turned out to be a boy who had simply gotten separated from his mother. Stories like Black-Eyed Children tap directly into that primal fear, the dread of something wrong in what should be innocent. But they also remind us of our responsibility and compassion for those who are vulnerable. Urban legends like the Black-Eyed Children aren't just ghost stories for fun. They're subtle reminders that in life, we need to trust our instincts, recognize warning signs, and protect ourselves. But at the same time, we shouldn't let vague fears make us lose our kindness. Learning to tell the difference between real danger and unfounded fear is an important lesson, so we can stay safe without slamming the door on those who truly need our help. The Leaning Tower of Britain, the Tilting Tower in Texas. Not every leaning structure is a construction mistake. Sometimes it's a classic Texan joke, a way to make you smile and pull over for a closer look. Main content. Along Interstate 40 near Groom, Texas, you'll come across a sight you simply can't ignore. An old water tower leaning at a dramatic 10-degree angle, looking as if it might topple at any moment. But don't worry, it's meant to lean like that. Originally, it was a functioning water tower, but when it no longer met safety standards for holding water, a local businessman bought it. Instead of tearing it down or abandoning it, he decided to turn it into a unique advertisement for his truck stop. The tower was deliberately propped up at that tilt, with "Britain, USA" painted on its side, a humorous invitation to drivers and travelers passing by. Although the truck stop itself burned down in the 1990s, the Leaning Tower remains standing, a small landmark along the route where people still stop to take photos and joke about Texas's Leaning Tower. Honestly, I love those quirky roadside stops. On a cross-state trip, I once pulled over to pose for a goofy selfie next to a 20-foot metal robot, just because I could. But it's these unexpected fun stops that break up the monotony of the road and turn a trip into a real memory. When I see the Leaning Water Tower, I don't just see an old structure. I see the humor and creativity of the people of Texas. Sometimes it's the odd, imperfect things that make a place memorable and charming. That Leaning Tower is a reminder that creativity often grows out of challenges. When something can't serve its old purpose anymore, why not turn it into something new, fun, and full of character? It's a small but valuable lesson in flexibility and optimism in life. La Lechuza, the Owl Witch legend of Texas. Texas isn't just about cowboys, pickup trucks, and sprawling ranches. It also has chilling tales of owl witches, half-human, half-bird creatures that make you shiver before daring to step into the night. La Lechuza is an old legend along the Texas-Mexico border, telling of a woman accused of witchcraft by her village and burned alive. Consumed by hatred, her spirit was said to return from the dead in a monstrous form. A giant owl with a human head, long, tangled hair, glowing yellow eyes in the darkness, and razor-sharp talons capable of ripping flesh. Many stories describe La Lechuza gliding silently along pitch-black country roads, making whistling sounds, singing, or crying to lure victims into the deep woods, only to vanish with their final scream. People believe that if you hear that whistle, you must not answer, or you'll be carried away forever. To protect themselves, people passed down various methods: tying a string with 7 knots and hanging it by the door, throwing salt or chili powder into its eyes if attacked, or praying fervently to the Virgin Mary. In 1975 in Robstown, Texas, panic over La Lechuza spread throughout the community when many people, including police officers, reported seeing a giant bird with a human face flying around town. Local TV covered the story, and a flood of frantic calls sent the community into fear. Things only calmed down after it was discovered that a group of children had built a prank scarecrow with wings and a human head to fool the police. But even after being exposed, the fear never completely went away. When I was little, my grandmother would tell spooky stories to scare me into staying inside at night. Ghosts in the water, wandering spirits, old witches. Stories like La Lechuza are the same, like an invisible boundary adults set to keep kids safe. I understand now that behind that fear was care, a kind of love that children don't always recognize until they grow up. Folklore isn't just for scaring people. It teaches us to fear what should be feared: the dark, the deep woods, deserted alleys, and misplaced curiosity. Because sometimes, what keeps us safest isn't blind bravery, but careful respect for the limits that older generations warned us about through stories like these. Don't mess with Texas. The story behind the legendary slogan, "Don't mess with Texas." It sounds like a fierce warning Texans give anyone who dares cross them. But did you know? This iconic slogan actually started with something surprisingly down to earth: an anti-litter campaign. Back in the mid-1980s, Texas was struggling with a big problem: trash along its highways. Beer cans, plastic bags, and fast food wrappers littered the wide open roads that Texans took such pride in. And the main culprits were a very Texan group: young pickup drivers, free-spirited but, well, a bit messy. In 1985, the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, decided to do something bold. They hired an advertising agency with one clear directive: come up with a message strong enough to strike at the heart of Texas pride. The copywriter recalled his mother scolding him with, "Your room's a mess," and had a flash of inspiration: mess with Texas. It felt familiar, but also carried a defiant edge. And so, "Don't Mess with Texas" was born. Not a threat to invading enemies, but a warning to anyone thinking of littering. The slogan went up on highway signs, aired on TV, was plastered on trucks, and featured at concerts and big events. And amazingly, it worked far better than expected. In the first 3 years, roadside litter dropped by 72%. Over time, the slogan took on a life of its own. It became a symbol of Texas pride, printed on hats, t-shirts, bumper stickers. Texans wear it as a declaration: we're not just protecting our roads, we're protecting who we are. I still remember the first time I drove across Texas, seeing that huge "Don't Mess with Texas" sign and laughing out loud. It sounded like a threat to out-of-staters. But a bit further along, I noticed everyone was keeping their trash in the car, and I realized it really worked. Personally, I always carry a small trash bag in my car, and driving through Texas, I'd remind myself, don't embarrass yourself here. "Don't mess with Texas" is a perfect example of the power of words. When a message taps into pride, identity, and community spirit, it stops being a dry reminder and becomes a shared promise. It shows us that language can change behavior and awareness, not just through stern warnings, but through smart, relatable ideas. When a community comes together, it can turn a small campaign into a cultural movement. And even though it started as a simple reminder not to litter, it's become part of the Texas spirit: tough, proud, and deeply responsible. Oklahoma's Panhandle, a historical mistake by Texas. Now let's take a slight detour across the Texas border to explain why the U.S. map has that odd panhandle jutting out from Oklahoma. That shape isn't random. It's the result of a not-so-glorious historical decision. Back in the 19th century, when Texas joined the United States, it came with grand ambitions, a vast territory stretching all the way up to the 36th parallel. But there was a problem. Under the political compromises of the time, any land north of that line had to follow rules banning the expansion of a certain form of forced labor that Texas wanted to preserve. Faced with that choice, Texas decided to relinquish all land north of the 36th parallel so it could keep its preferred laws in the rest. The result? A rectangular strip about 34 miles wide and 166 miles long that no longer belonged to Texas and wasn't part of any other state either, becoming no man's land on paper. For decades, this area was practically lawless. Settlers, gold prospectors, and even people wanting to dodge taxes all flocked there because there was no strict government oversight. Stories say that the only law was whatever you could enforce or manage to avoid. It wasn't until 1890 that the U.S. Congress ended the chaos by attaching no man's land to Oklahoma territory. When Oklahoma became a state in 1907, the Panhandle officially appeared on the U.S. map as part of Oklahoma. Today, the Oklahoma Panhandle seems peaceful, with wide fields and endless wind. But that sharp, straight border silently tells the story of a political choice and its consequences. As a kid, I used to look at the U.S. map and think state borders were as natural as rivers or mountains. Growing up, I learned, no, they're the legacy of negotiation, conflict, and human calculation. And when I drive through the Oklahoma Panhandle, I often wonder, how many lives were shaped by those straight lines on a map? Borders don't just divide land, they tell human stories of ambition, conflict, and the long-lasting impact of decisions made in the past. We shouldn't just look at maps to navigate. We should also ask ourselves, what kind of legacy do we want to leave for future generations? Lanite, Texas's exclusive gemstone. Texas isn't just famous for oil or endless highways. It also hides a mysterious gem beneath its soil. Lanite, a quiet treasure found only in this land. Lanite is an extremely rare intrusive rock, with sparkling blue quartz and pink feldspar, glowing like polished marble. When it's cut and polished, or even weathered by rain and sun, the tiny crystals on its surface reflect light in a mesmerizing way, like a starry sky trapped in stone. What makes Lanite even more special is that you can find it only in Llano County, in an area known as the Llano Uplift, a piece of Texas shaped by millions of years of geological upheaval. There, ancient magma bodies pushed up close to the surface and slowly cooled underground. During that slow cooling process, mineral crystals grew large and arranged themselves in an unexpectedly intricate pattern. Scientists believe the blue color in Lanite's quartz comes from ultra-fine rutile needles trapped within the crystal, like strands of light frozen in time. And while granite is common all over the world, Lanite is a one-off geological recipe that Earth seems to have written only once, then lost the formula forever. Today, Lanite is not only a treasure for geologists, but is also cut for countertops, jewelry, and souvenirs, always reminding people of Texas's ancient geological roots. I'm no geology expert, but I'll admit, I'm fascinated by beautiful stones. I remember once trekking in the mountains, picking up a few ordinary-looking rocks that felt priceless to me, because they were memories, pieces of the land I walked on. Woolonite is the same. Its beauty isn't just in its colors, but in the history recorded in each crystal. Value doesn't lie only in rarity, but in the story it tells. Woolonite is a reminder of Earth's history spanning millions of years, and it teaches us to appreciate things that seem small, but contain an entire glorious past that humans can only humbly listen to. The Lubbock UFO Case, 1957. Do you believe that something in the sky could make your car stall in the middle of the night? In Texas, one night in 1957 in Lubbock saw 15 separate calls reporting exactly that. It's a story that's both thrilling and makes you wonder, is something out there watching us? On the night of November 23rd, 1957, residents in Lubbock and nearby areas flooded the police with reports about an unidentified flying object. Witnesses described seeing a bright blue light, oval or egg-shaped, hovering close to the ground or gliding over pitch-dark roads. What frightened people most was the phenomenon that many described in the same way. Their cars stalled suddenly. Engines died. Headlights went dark. Radios went silent. All of it returning to normal only after the object moved away. That night, the Lubbock Police Department recorded 15 separate reports, not counting others who didn't call, but spread the story by word of mouth. The news spread so quickly and widely that the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book, a team tasked with investigating unidentified flying objects, sent investigators to look into it. After interviewing only a few witnesses, just 3 of the 15 official reports, they concluded the cause could have been ball lightning or St. Elmo's fire, rare electrical phenomena in humid air. However, many researchers challenged this explanation. They pointed out that there were no storms or lightning conditions reported that night. Some witnesses even described the sky as perfectly clear. So what was it really? A rare natural phenomenon, a mass hoax, or something we still don't have a name for? I once had a friend tell me about running out of gas at night on the highway. Not because of a UFO, just poor planning. But when I read about cars stalling all at once in Lubbock, it gave me chills. Whether it was a natural event or not, the thought of being stranded in the middle of nowhere, your car dead silent, surrounded by darkness, that's something no one wants to experience. Whether or not you believe in UFOs, this story reminds us to stay humble in the face of things we can't explain. Sometimes we think we understand the world completely, only to run into something that doesn't fit our usual scientific models. And on a more practical note, it's a good reminder to always be prepared when traveling far. On an empty road, even a small mishap can turn into an unforgettable experience. Aurora's UFO crash, 1897. When you hear Roswell, you immediately think of UFOs. But did you know Aurora, Texas, claims to have witnessed America's first flying saucer crash? It's a story that's as unbelievable as it is revealing about human nature. In April 1897, the Dallas Morning News published an article reporting that an airship, the term for flying craft at the time, had crashed into Judge Proctor's windmill in Aurora. The explosion destroyed both the windmill and a nearby well. In the wreckage, townspeople claimed they found a small body that wasn't human. An Army officer declared the being was, undoubtedly, a Martian. Instead of sending it away for study, the people of Aurora held a proper burial for it in the local cemetery. The wreckage of the airship was supposedly dumped into the well. The story didn't end there. Brody Oates, who later bought the property, reopened the old well to get water. He then developed severe arthritis and believed something from the wreck had poisoned him, fueling rumors of alien metal. Decades later, MUFON, a group specializing in UFO research, came to investigate. They found an old gravestone said to mark the alien pilot's grave, and noted traces of metal in the soil. But when they returned seeking permission to exhume it, the headstone had vanished, and the metal traces were gone too. Many believe the whole thing was a hoax. At the time, Aurora was dying, struggling with disease, drought, and losing out on promised railroad connections. A sensational news story about Martians might have been a desperate bid to hold on to hope and keep the town on the map. I've always been fascinated by small towns with weird stories like this, partly because I understand that feeling of wanting to hold on to something special about where you live, something to be proud of, to tell your kids about, to give your community a reason to matter on the map. We don't create legends only to scare people or attract tourists. Sometimes they're a way for a dying community to keep hope alive and assert its worth. And maybe, just maybe, that belief, true or not, is what keeps small places alive. So what do you think about all of today's strange Texas tales? From underground walls that seem built by giants, lost wagon trains swallowed by shifting dunes, to owl witches and UFOs that stall cars, which legend left the biggest impression on you? Leave a comment to share your thoughts. I always read everyone to learn more about what you want to hear in future episodes. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our storytelling adventures. Thank you for sitting down and listening to me. I'll see you in the next story. Because wherever there's darkness and mystery, it's always story time.